Welcome to episode 200 of the Health with Hashimoto's podcast. 200. This is a huge milestone. Did you know that most podcasts, especially when they are launched by just like one person, no team, nothing behind them, they don't go beyond 10 episodes. And here you are supporting me as I release episode 200. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing and following, however you do it in the platform that you listen on. If you have left a rating and review, thank you from the bottom of my heart. That is what tells the algorithms on all of the different platforms that this podcast is worth listening to, and they push it out to more people. So thank you so much for supporting me. This is going to be a busy week for the Health with Hashimoto's podcast. Today, I have an interview for you. I wanted to do something special for episode 200, and one of the most popular topics that I talk about and that people ask about is diet. So today I am interviewing Mickey Trescott, and she's going to talk about the Autoimmune Protocol. I did not realize that this protocol was essentially started by a group of women, and Mickey is one of those women who started it. So her story and all of the information is phenomenal. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. And then on Monday, it is May 25th, which is Annual World Thyroid Day. So I will have an episode like with the basics that if you want to just share one episode with somebody to say this is Hashimoto's or this is thyroid, that will be the episode to share. So May 25th, every year, I try to do something fun. So that's going to be this coming Monday if you're listening in real time. And then because Mickey is releasing a new book, I will also do my monthly book review episode, and that will be on Saturday. And then finally, before I hit play on the interview, head down to the show notes where you will find a link so you can pre-order Mickey's new book. It is a gorgeous book. I have it in my hand right now as I record. It is absolutely gorgeous. You can look at the episode cover at the picture and you can see it. It releases on May 26th. So if you're listening in real time, it is May 21st today when this episode releases, and the book comes out in just a couple days. So you can head over to Amazon or your local book retailer and pre-order it, and then you can get it next week. Welcome to the Health with Hashimoto's podcast. This is where you will find clarity and simple, sustainable strategies to feel better. I want to help you figure out your root causes. My name is Esther. I am a registered nurse. I know how exhausting it is to live with fatigue, brain fog, and the ups and downs of Hashimoto's. And that is why I'm here. I'm here to cut through the confusion and to give you practical steps that support your body, calm your immune system, so that you can regain your energy and feel like yourself again. Welcome back to the Health with Hashimoto's podcast. Today, I am joined by Mickey Trescott. She has her master's degree in functional nutrition, which is so phenomenal. I don't know about you, but I have seen so many influencers on social media talking about nutrition and talking about autoimmune and talking about Hashimoto's and how they have the best advice because they have personal experience. Well, Mickey has personal experience. She was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in her 20s, but then she has a master's degree in functional nutrition. So I'm super excited for this conversation. She is releasing a brand new cookbook. It is the new Autoimmune Protocol. So if you're curious about the AIP diet, that is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, Mickey. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Esther, for having me. So I am an autoimmune patient, first and foremost. This is kind of how I got into doing what I do. About 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with celiac and Hashimoto's disease after a pretty severe health crisis. So I know now, in retrospect, a lot of autoimmune patients report the average of being 6 years and 5 doctors, according to the Autoimmune Association. My diagnosis was a little bit faster at 2 years, but there was some unresolved stuff, and I had a pretty crazy crash. So I ended up with white matter lesions in my brain. So they thought maybe I had multiple sclerosis. I also had a lot of pains in my chest cavity, like pleurisy and costochondritis. So maybe I had like a connective tissue issue. So I was kind of bouncing around from different specialists, and they landed on celiac and Hashimoto's, told me, your thyroid's normal, just you don't need any treatment, despite being completely debilitated, being bedridden, and previously I had been a super active person in my 20s. Yeah, I was rock climbing, I was cycling, I was running, I was doing all the things. And then all of a sudden, I literally could not even work my coffee shop job. So
Mm.
that's really what led me to do research about diet and autoimmune disease. I'd had a prior job working as a chef. So I had been working under very well trained chefs, kind of learning from them. Some of them had like holistic background where they were cooking Ayurvedic and all kinds of different interesting medicinal ways. And so it really inspired me to kind of lean back on that and think maybe diet could be a solution. And that's how I found the autoimmune protocol. And of course, back then it was this thing that was one sentence in, functional medicine circles and ancestral medicine circles. It was kind of nobody's child, but, a bunch of researchers were talking about it. And as a patient, I was like, I'm just going to try this. And I found some other women that were also trying it for different autoimmune conditions like IBD, multiple sclerosis. We formed a little group on Facebook, which, today would be kind of the girlfriend group chat. And we were just all sharing experiences with each other, implementing this thing that was, again, a sentence in, a few different resources. And out of that and out of our collective experience where we all kind of recovered our health using this came the movement of AIP growing, to expand to other people and conditions and eventually books and everything, and kind of led me on the path to where I'm at today.
Wow. That's wow. Like you went from super healthy, super active to bedridden to now you're healthy again. And diet was at the core of your healing journey. I love that. And like you said, it was one sentence. So can you tell us how has AIP evolved from what was that one sentence? And then through the years, what is it now?
Yeah, so back then, there was this paleo diet caveat where if you have autoimmune conditions, you might consider removing grains, legumes, eggs, nuts, seeds, and nightshades. And today, we know that as core AIP. That's kind of the original autoimmune protocol. But that was literally the sentence, take out these foods in addition to like a paleo diet, or in functional medicine, they were using specific elimination diets for autoimmune disease that had the same list of foods. And the reason why these foods were highlighted is because there was some research at the time in, specific foods showing how they interact with the gut environment, specifically with leaky gut. And I'm sure your listeners are familiar with kind of those tight junctions and, anything that people are sensitive to that can kind of provoke an immune response can kind of open up those tight junctions, set off the immune system. Of course, with autoimmune disease, we have a wonky immune system already. So these researchers were basically theorizing if we take out all of these foods that somebody could be sensitive to, then that kind of clears the slate and they might feel better. There was no advice of like what to do next. So there was no reintroductions. It was just this diet. And at the time, I discovered it. I experienced really meaningful improvement in my health. I will say I've had also good medical care alongside of that. So, it took me about 9 months after I discovered AIP. I experienced a lot of improvement. But then I saw a doctor who was finally willing to treat my thyroid. I think that was doctor number 6 for me specifically with the Hashimoto's, which, if you have Hashimoto's, like you're probably not unfamiliar with that experience. And I needed that too. The diet was a part, the medication, type and dose and everything was a part. But together, those things really led to meaningful improvements for myself and a lot of other people. And then that's kind of where the movement was born and where it turned into, thanks to Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, who is actually one of the original 6 women who I did AIP with. She has a background, PhD level research biomechanics. And so she used her research background to kind of solidify it into a protocol like, let's do this for, a month or 3, and let's reintroduce foods based on allergy and immunology research. So that was kind of the original autoimmune protocol was, you eliminate the foods, you do it for a defined period of time, maybe a month or 2, but people honestly back then were doing it far too long. And then you reintroduce foods to see individually how each food affects you. Now, today, fast forward 15 years, we have medical studies starting around 2015. AIP has been studied as the whole diet and lifestyle approach in humans with different autoimmune conditions. So while this original research was all a lot of animal model or a lot of single food in humans, it was pieced together from a bunch of different sources. We now have data showing that AIP used in specific populations like IBD, which includes Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. That pilot study was conducted in 2015. The results came out around 2017, and there are about 17 people, and they showed that within 6 weeks, 73% of them reached clinical remission, which, if you guys are familiar with Crohn's and colitis, they're not asking people if they feel better subjectively. They're going in with a scope, they're doing a colonoscopy and endoscopy, they're looking at the tissue, and they're getting a visual reference. So that is really meaningful. There have been 2 studies in Hashimoto's, which I know your audience is really excited about. I am too, because I'm a Hashi's patient, showing symptom improvement in either 10 and 12 weeks were the 2 different study lengths, and we can talk more about that. There have also has been a study in psoriasis and a couple studies in rheumatoid arthritis. And actually, one of the rheumatoid arthritis studies was actually just published a couple weeks ago, conducted in New Zealand. So now there's all this research about real people, groups of people. Of course, we're defining categories. So this, RA group, I think, was like 9. Hashimoto's was 17 in one and 30 in another. IBD's like 16 or 17. But these are real humans living their normal lives. They have autoimmune disease. Each paper defines kind of how long and how sick they were. But that information out of that has really informed the AIP community and the practitioner community in how to use the protocol, and then now how to modify it even. So I have a book that's coming out. It's called The New Autoimmune Protocol, and it really synthesizes all of this research in a way that, a regular person can understand, but then also show why now we have that core AIP, which is kind of that original framework. And then now we have modified AIP, which is a new framework that has kind of come out of the research and actually come out of how effective core AIP was. It's extremely effective, but it is also stressful. And not everybody can do it. So over the years, you'll hear people saying, I tried AIP, it was too hard, I just couldn't stick with it. Now we have this new approach. It's more affordable, it's more accessible because it includes some foods that make it really convenient, and it expands some nutrient density. And so, yeah, that's what I'm really excited about with this launch.
Yeah, one of my most popular podcast episodes is, I think, number 44, and it's about like choosing the right diet for you, because like you said, adopting a new diet can be super stressful. And that was my story. I was told to stay away from all of these foods, and I ended up like almost not eating. Like, I can't eat. I don't know what to eat. And therefore I am just not going to eat, which is obviously not healthy. Like,
Yeah,
mentally
yeah.
stressful, physically stressful, like all of the above. So what advice would you give to somebody if they're just diagnosed? I had a message in my inbox just the other day, just diagnosed. They told me to stay away from, I think she said, dairy, gluten, and eggs is what her provider told her. And they said, this is lifelong. What would you tell somebody in that spot?
Yeah, so this is a really great question because, specifically with the autoimmune protocol, so AIP is not something that's lifelong. That's something that a lot of people mistake about it, is they think that it's a diet that you just apply either for prevention or for maintenance. And the autoimmune protocol is actually something that you go through and you do to experience how your body feels when you lower that inflammation, you reintroduce foods, and then you land on a perfect diet for you long term. And you also have this skill of how diet affects you and really learning how these different foods affect you. So it's really not a diet. It's just kind of something that you use, a tool that you use in order to basically design your ideal diet going forward. Something when like somebody is facing down some eliminations like gluten, dairy, and eggs, those are very, very common food triggers. And I don't know if this person, maybe they had a food sensitivity test, which is very common. That is a big reason why a provider might be like, you're not going to be able to have these foods for a long time. And of course, that's really hard, but those foods might actually be real triggers for her. And so she's going to have to figure out how to eliminate them. So my advice is actually, the same whether or not you're staring down like a celiac disease like I had, I'm going to have to remove gluten from my diet forever. I know that right at the outset. Or if you're going to go through something that's like a short-term protocol, like the autoimmune protocol, you need to learn how to sustainably make the change. And so the preparation is really where a lot of people get lost. And something that I've added to this book, the new autoimmune protocol, specifically the transition phase to the autoimmune protocol, needs to be more robust. And you can apply this to any type of diet change that anybody is going to make that's going to be long term. And really, the steps are to really define your why. So, like, why are you doing this? This person wants to feel healthy, but why do they want to feel healthy? What is their vision of health? A lot of us, we're so sick in our bodies, we can't imagine a future. I really remember feeling like this. Like, I couldn't imagine my future as like aging, already being so sick at 26. I had no ability to comprehend healing. And I think that's actually a really important part of going through the process of healing, is imagining yourself feeling better, and then also experiencing life in the way that you want to, whether or not you have perfect health. So I talk about in the book, I have this exercise defining your health vision, which is really just kind of clarifying for yourself, like what health means to you and why you want to be healthy. And like for me, I define health as the ability to spend time and do things with the people that I love. And I like that expansive approach because it doesn't require me to have like perfect lab work, right? It doesn't require me to be able to like lift a certain amount of weight in the gym, right? Like it is really allows a lot of variation. And I will go through seasons where, I'm here or there, but like when I think back on that, I'm like, this is why I do what I do. And I can still do these things even when I'm kind of not feeling my best, right? So I love that exercise for anybody who's about to go through change, because you can really fall back on that when things get hard, right? And then the second thing that I love doing is a confidence assessment. So I have this exercise in the book. There's about 10 different questions, 10 different areas where you're going to rate yourself from a 1 to 10, how confident you are in that area. Because whenever we change a diet or do something with our lifestyle, everybody has a different friction point, right? Some people, they can't go up $1 in their food budget without stress. Other people have a lot of money in their budget, but they just don't have the time, right? Some people don't know how to cook. Other people don't even know how to pick out a sweet potato, right? So your barrier, it might be an unsupportive partner. It might be that you're weighed down in caretaking for an elderly family member or kids. Whatever that is, that's your unique thing. And so putting that out in front and saying, okay, here is my thing. Here's the thing that's going to make this really hard. And then before you do anything, spending time kind of pre-solving that barrier. So if finances are an issue, it's like, where can I get these ingredients for the best price? How do I need to alter my routine? Maybe to go to different stores or, get a membership to Costco or, find a creative solution to that problem instead of trying to do that while you're also trying to implement the diet, because that's just the hardest thing to do. So that would be my advice.
That is very helpful. I absolutely needed something like that when I was first diagnosed, and I know a lot of people do. Will you tell us about your book? Because it's not just here's the science, here's the research, here's AIP, but you also have like cookbook. So tell us about your book.
Oh, yeah. So about half the book is the new Autoimmune Protocol program guide, and it's written to be extremely clear and simple for people with brain fog because, I'm a Hashimoto's girly myself. I have my moments to just be really clear. This is how you do it. These are the parameters. Now, we were talking a little bit about AIP back in the day, which was like one sentence. Now you get half of a book where I'm just telling you exactly like, okay, you're going to transition following these steps. This is how long you're going to spend doing each of the steps. Here's how you know when you're ready. Then you do the elimination, which is kind of where all the work is done. You're going to do it for 30 to 90 days. You're going to track your symptoms and hopefully your baseline increases. When you get that baseline increase, you're going to walk through reintroductions, which I talk about, the stages. You're going to reintroduce foods that are most likely to be successful and most nutrient dense, because of course we want an expansive approach to diet. Again, this is not like this forever restricted thing, right? And you're going to follow a procedure so that you can actually identify which foods are causing your symptoms. And so I talk about all of that, including like frequently asked questions and some troubleshooting. And I also cover the science in a way that, like, if you wanted to show your partner who loves science and is kind of skeptical, or your doctor, you could show that. And it all has references and everything in those human studies that I talked about, because that is really important. We want to know that the thing that we're doing, the method, is actually something that people have put to the test. Of course, these groups are pretty small, but they do tell us that about 3 out of 4 people experience meaningful improvement when they do something like the Autoimmune Protocol, even as short as like 6 weeks in this IBD study, up to about 3 months. And so hopefully that is just a really clear package that everybody can understand. If you're interested in AIP, this is kind of the new resource. And then the second half of the book is a cookbook. And it's a cookbook that has a core AIP recipe collection and a modified AIP recipe collection. Now, I've been writing recipes for 15 years. I've written over 500 of them. This is my fourth cookbook. And really, the energy that I brought to this recipe development was, how can I bring you guys these recipes that are the most nutrient dense, eliminate all the ingredients that we're not having in the elimination phase, but also not be weird and be affordable and like one pot and not a lot of cleanup. So like that's a lot of filters, right? You might be like, thought about that and like nothing comes up. Well, I can tell you these recipes are definitely the types of things that I have put so much time and energy into, just figuring out how you can hack making food, especially like batch cooking, making a few extra portions to throw in your freezer. That's something that I really recommend for like when you don't have a lot of capacity, you wake up, you're in a flare, we have autoimmune disease, it's going to happen. So just making sure that you have easy options, but also that they're not weird, because, sometimes we're eating with our families and like we want everybody to be on board, right? We don't want to be trying to recreate something that's just not working out with a bunch of expensive ingredients. So half of it's a cookbook.
Yeah. You mentioned like waking up and all of a sudden you're in a flare. In that situation, would you recommend like restarting the protocol, or what's the protocol in that
This is an
situation?
awesome question. Thank you so much, Esther, for asking it. So I love this concept that I call battening down the hatches and unfurling the sails. And battening down the hatches is when you start waking up, and like for me with Hashimoto's, I'm just like not getting out of bed after my alarm. I'm not recovering from my workouts. I'm starting to notice those signs of like engine trouble, like we're maybe going to go into a flare here. What I do is I take a couple steps back with my diet to eliminate foods that I call my gray area foods. So when we reintroduce foods, it's very rarely a clear reaction. You're going to get a lot of reactions. Like my reaction to eggs, it's like I eat them once, I'm fine. I eat them the second day, I'm like, digestively. I eat them the third day, and I am definitely constipated and bloated, and my gut is inflamed, and I know that that's a no. So they're gray area foods for me. Will I have eggs once in a while? Of course. One dose of them like does not bother me, but eating them in like all the time is not really work for me. So when I'm battening down the hatches, I'm not having any of those gray area foods. I'm just kind of going a couple steps back. For some people, that might be pretty close to the elimination phase. For other people who have included some other food sustainably, they know that it's not a problem for them. Like for me, this is rice. Like I've never had a reaction to rice. Rice is very supportive to me. I'm very active. I'm not going to leave that out. I know it works for me. But eggs, for sure, nightshades, dairy, I'm leaving these things that are maybe a little more questionable out. And then I'm relying on foundational foods that I know make me feel good. So bone broth, lots of protein, fermented foods, colorful vegetables. A lot of times when I'm in a flare, I don't want a lot of raw food. I actually tolerate better like slow cooked, slow cooker or pressure cooker, slow roasted meats, that kind of thing feels really good to my system and nourishing when I'm like that. So that's kind of like a batten down the hatches. Then when you're feeling good, you're like, I've not felt my Hashimoto symptoms in a while. I'm waking up feeling energized. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to live a little. It doesn't mean I'm going to eat gluten. Like I have celiac disease. Like that would not be smart. But I might have like an gluten-free egg dessert or something, something that's like a little special, because I'm on this trip and I want to eat out and I want to try something and I know what the consequences are. That's the most important thing. Once you've done reintroductions, you've kind of experienced that progress, you've kind of experienced the symptoms, and then you get to decide if those symptoms are worth it for you long term, because that's all what we're doing here is, trying to live our best lives and find fulfillment and joy. And sometimes that means, like when we were all in college or, young, staying up late, knowing that like we have a test the next day, we just like wanted to experience that. Everybody knew like it's going to be hard for my brain to focus and do well tomorrow. But guess what? I'm hanging out with my friends, like you knew what you're getting into. So sometimes we do that with food when the consequences are not so extreme and we kind of know what we're getting into.
Yes. Yeah, we are all absolutely bio-individual. And like for myself, I even have to time things in my hormonal cycle. Like I know when I'm ovulating, I can eat certain things, but when I get closer to my period, like it's almost like batten down the hatches every
Yeah.
single month
Oh,
because
yeah.
I know I'm more susceptible to
Yep.
junk going wrong.
Yeah, and I mean perimenopause, I just hit perimenopause a couple years ago, and I definitely notice, like you, a cyclical tolerance for food. And I am not an expert in this area, but I have learned from other experts that like estrogen really controls histamine release, which is in the gut, which is like food sensitivity. So you can become sensitive to things that maybe you weren't sensitive to before, different combinations, different time of the month, that is all real and valid. So, yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because that's something that I'm personally also working with at this time in my life.
Every single day we get to like be the detective that solves our own personal mystery. But your
Uh-huh.
book is going to be so helpful. So tell us again the name of the book and where people can find it and when.
Yeah.
You said it's not quite out right now.
Yeah, so it comes out on May 26th. It's called The New Autoimmune Protocol. It's got this beautiful navy blue cover with a little plate of some fermented food and veggies and chicken on the front. It is available worldwide, so there is a Kindle version, so no matter where you're listening, you can always get that digital version. And I would also say that I really believe in not gatekeeping AIP information. So I have a website called theautoimmuneprotocol.com. All of the instructions, if you just want to like go check it out, everything's there for free. The book is just packaged in a way that I'm hoping that you find that helpful. That's a way that you can support me, but the information is all out there for free for everyone because I really want other people to be able to benefit from this information because of how much it but like how hard it was when I was sick. I just want to make it better for the next person. So that's just kind of why I do what I do.
That's awesome. And 3 out of 4 people are feeling better according to all the like actual research studies done. That is
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah, so like with IBD, I'll just give you a little snapshot of the result. With IBD, 6 weeks, they saw 73% clinical remission. These were patients who had been sick for 19 years on average with IBD, which is like not newly diagnosed people. They were also people who were not in clinical remission despite being on all the best conventional drugs, so like biologics and steroids and everything was breaking through. So that was actually really amazing. They also did a survey of IBD patients, of people who had used AIP. So this is a completely different population. They came up with the exact same 73% of people self-reported that they reached clinical remission with AIP, which was really interesting. The Hashimoto's groups are challenging because we don't have clinical remission as a marker of progress with Hashimoto. So of course, we know that up to 60% of patients who have Hashimoto's and are treated correctly to target, so this means like our hormone levels are normal, we report symptoms that interfere with daily life. This is just a feature of Hashimoto's, is just that it's why practitioners think it's like kind of a basic autoimmune disease. And it's because they think that, you correct the hormone deficiency and the problem goes away. Turns out it doesn't. We have lots of symptoms. So the symptom burden change in Hashimoto's in both the studies, there's an American study and there's a Polish study, was amazing across the board. 30 to 60% of the symptoms were decreased by a lot. And if you guys are curious about this, I have lots of research reviews on the autoimmuneprotocol.com where I break down all the results of the studies. The Polish team also actually did a nutrient comparison where they kept the calories, so the energy density of the participants' diets before and after AIP exactly the same, so about 2,000 calories. And the participants lost an average of 8 pounds and 10% relative body fat without changing the energy density and without doing anything with their medication or their hormones. So this is something that, like, with Hashimoto's, it's really hard to grasp like a meaningful change. Like with IBD, you can go in with a camera, you can take a picture, right? With Hashimoto's, it's just really hard to see when you feel better. But that Polish team did a really good job implementing some of those anthropometric changes. They did a thyroid ultrasound that showed that the swelling and inflammation in the thyroid decreased. So that was all really interesting. And then for rheumatoid arthritis, the study that just came out showed that 77% of those participants that did, again, like an AIP trial for, I think, 8 or 10 weeks, they experienced meaningful clinical improvement. I believe 30% of them reached clinical remission. So, with each disease, the target's a little bit different, what that means, but it's a great result. So I would summarize all of that to say, if you have an autoimmune disease, you haven't tried AIP, chances are 3 out of 4, you're going to get a meaningful improvement based on some of the evidence that we have. And I think that those are really good odds for trying to figure things out. And I would also say for that last person, having also worked one-on-one with people this whole 15 years of my practice, there are a lot of underlying causes that when people treat and when they work one-on-one with someone, they figure that out. That's the thing, that's the obstacle to them really getting better. That's not really something you can implement in a study. But I would say if you try AIP and it doesn't work for you, there are lots of providers you can work one-on-one with to kind of do that root cause troubleshooting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're not one of the 3 out of 4, you're that 4th, but there's still hope. You're not stuck.
Absolutely.
This is not a life sentence.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, Mickey, if there is only one thing that somebody can take away from the conversation, what is the biggest thing that you want him or her to remember?
Yeah. So my biggest takeaway is, for everybody listening, one thing that you can do, even if you're not ready to start an elimination diet or do anything, just think about nutrient density. I think when we have chronic illness, we often think of eliminating and removing and avoiding, and that's very negative. I love to reframe it with the positive because every day we have 3+ opportunities to nourish our bodies. And there are so many good things that we can say we know about food for everybody, colorful plants, omega-3s, fermented foods, however you eat, these things are components of a healthy microbiome and they construct a healthy body, right? So just think of those 3 meals as an opportunity to nourish yourself with something that makes you feel good, and also pay attention, what makes me feel good? Because what makes me feel bad can get really into a spiral. It's helpful, it's information, but also paying attention to what makes you feel good, because over the years, the things that I really fall back on are the things that make me feel good. I chase those before I chase anything else. And that just allows me to continue to feel positive and empowered and like I can do something to make myself feel better, So that's my advice.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Please discuss any changes with your trusted healthcare provider. To take your next step, join our school community and explore the courses available there. You do not have to figure your health out alone. So that is school, SKOOL.com, and it is the Health with Hashimoto's community. I'll see you next time on the Health with Hashimoto's podcast.